Beth.
How are you?
How's Fred tonight?
He's home.
Okay. You have something for me to say? No minutes to approve tonight?
No, this is a special meeting, so no.
Okay. Stacy, how are you? Well, how's Jimmy Sear doing? You got Thanksgiving?
Hey, old timer.
Hey!
Excuse me. Nice seeing
See you.
I did find my shirt. It's still fit.
Great. There you go.
Over to talk to our old pal, too. I already did. A half an hour with him. Just shooting the shit.
Great to see you.
Nice seeing you.
Thanks for coming
How are
tonight.
you, honey?
Hello.
Nice seeing you.
Nice to see you. Haven't seen you for a long time.
I didn't have to come down here for a long time. Hell, all the years I lived in the city of Peoria after I retired, I finally moved to
Where'd you move to?
Germantown 2 years ago. All my son, grandson, or all the grandkids are over there. Oh, God, I love it. I mean,
Yes.
46 years in the same house in East Bluff.
Yeah.
Retirement, so.
Yeah.
Still pretty good, come out of Dodge.
Yeah. So, one thing about all the retirees, they look so much healthier than the others. Once they're still working.
Well, I had to kneel down over there. I was talking to Eric, kind of confidential on a couple things, and I said, "He's going to come with the firefighters to help me get up off the slope."
That's the other side.
Yeah.
Please, I borrow a pen from you.
Oh, sure. Do you?
I don't know
Which
how
do
I
you
managed
want?
to forget just any. That's good.
So,
Texted me yesterday because apparently he had seen the video also in the press conference, and at that point I was not talking to anybody. I was like, I was spent. It was over. I was done. I went shopping at 6:30 and was out till about 10:30, and I felt better when I got done. So.
Well, that's extremely disrespectful that they did that.
I'd like to call this evening's special meeting of the Peoria City Council to order. Welcome H. Wayne Wilson and his listening audience at WCBU as well as Cable Channel 22. Madam Clerk, the council microphones are open for roll call. Here.
Councilmember Akeson. Here. Councilmember Sear.
Here.
Councilmember Grayeb.
Here.
Councilmember Jensen. Councilmember Montalongo. Councilmember Moore.
Here.
Councilmember Euler.
Here.
Councilmember Riggenbach.
Here.
And Councilmember Turner.
Present.
You have a quorum present, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. A notice was received by a member of the City Council in accordance with rules established in Ordinance Number 16142, and the member will be deemed authorized to attend the meeting electronically. Unless a motion objecting to the members' electronic attendance is made, seconded, and approved by 2/3 of the members of the City Council physically present at the meeting. If no such motion is made and seconded, then the request by the member to attend electronically shall be deemed approved by the City Council and the presiding officer and shall declare the requesting member present. Councilman Regal has given sufficient notice that he would like to attend electronically. I'm seeing no lights otherwise, so Madam Clerk, we will declare that the requesting member is present. At this time, we would like to ask everyone to join us and stand for a moment of silent prayer or silent reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk.
Our first item of business is 18-302, communication from the City Manager and Finance Director Comptroller with a request to receive and file a continued discussion of the 2019 revised budget.
Thank you. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I wanted to do this evening is start by just recapping what we had happen at the November 13th council meeting. And then outline a series of issues that we need to go into this evening. On November 13th, we started to work through the motions and issues pertaining to the closing the $6 million budget gap that we had in the proposed or the revised 2019 budget. Based upon an 8-3 motion from the council, to accept the manager's recommendations pertaining to the operating budget. We reduced that by $3.1 million. The revenue side, council voted 8-3 to approve the packaged liquor tax and the enhanced billing for EMS services. So that moves basically the gap in the budget down to about $2.2 million. This evening, there are some items that we want to take care of from a house cleaning perspective under capital improvements, as well as a couple of other motions that we'd like to just get council's feedback on. Then there is the discussion on the public safety pension fees. After the first reading, we took that we took the request of Councilwoman Akeson and tried to come up with a couple of different levels of that fee. So we need to discuss that. Or we need to discuss either additional expense cuts or additional revenue enhancements that council may want to consider to close that $2.2 million gap.
Any questions just on the outline of where we are to start the meeting? Okay.
Thank you. So the first items that we have, and I want you to turn your attention, council, you do have a copy of the handout that is in front of you. There's also a simple sheet that talks about motions for this evening. We'd like to do some housekeeping on the capital improvement program. Currently in the downtown TIF, we have a negative fund balance, so we'd like to push the capital projects out to 2020 and 2021 when we'll have available funds for that. And in addition, we put in the capital budget, we put $10,000 into the North Side Riverfront Facade Improvement Program. That North Side Riverfront TIF is actually expiring in 2018, so we just want to eliminate that line item. So this first request as a housekeeping matter would be to take $1,129,000 of projects that were slated in the downtown TIF That included $336,000 for wayfinding. It included $22,500 for the fire marine station, $245,000 for the gateway improvements, and $525,000 for the Jefferson deck, and pushes those out into 2020 and 2021, just simply to when we would have available fund balance to utilize those projects.
So for clarification, Mr. Manager, this is basically revenue neutral, correct? I mean, this isn't taking out or putting in. We don't have the money in the TIFs to do the project. So
we don't have the money in the TIF, so this takes it out from the spend for this year. So it would be an overall reduction of $1,139,000 of expense, but there's no money that corresponds with those.
Okay. Questions or motion? Councilman Moore.
I move to move the, as the manager indicated, the 2019 $10,000 out of the CIP for the North Business TIF, since that TIF will have expired at the end of 2018, that 2019 is not required.
Okay. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Riggenbach. Discussion, Councilmember Akeson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a question. This does not impact the LawCon line item on the CIP. We're just talking about these two items?
That's correct.
Are we going to be talking about the LawCon later? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a recap. I know you said it's $1,139,000 from the downtown TIF.
$1,129,000 from the downtown TIF and $10,000 that we had proposed from the Northside Riverfront TIF. And since that TIF is expiring, it's just eliminating that project altogether.
Okay, and then as a follow-up, does this then, I guess, is that the intention then that we'll come back with an ordinance to shut that TIF down, like we talked about last week?
We'll be discussing that in the next couple of slides.
Okay.
Councilmember Akeson.
Yes, it's me again. So I know during the last meeting I brought up this TIF issue, and it was described as we were veering off the conversation, and in the May 22nd City Council meeting, it was very clear the city manager expected a policy discussion during the budget session, and we haven't had one. So are we putting the cart before the horse, the horse here? I mean, I think we need to talk about when are we porting money, when TIFs close down. Are we going to port that money, or are we going to give it back to the taxing bodies? And when we do push off this, these expenditures, are they the highest and best use of the money? And I don't think we're veering off topic. It's $2.4 million in this CIP that is being funded by TIF dollars, and I think that as a council, we really haven't had a chance to talk about it yet. So I don't know when the appropriate time is, but I don't appreciate having it described as veering off topic. It's very much the topic of our budget discussion.
Mr. Manager.
All we're looking to do, since we don't have the funds available in the downtown TIF, is to push these projects off to a time when we do have funds available. After we address these two issues, the next item is more of a policy discussion about how do you want to handle closing down the Northside Riverfront TIF, or do you want to use it to fund projects? And that I agree, it is a policy discussion, a policy question we need to have.
Okay. Councilwoman Moore.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that is coming up. And what is coming up is my request to close that TIF. But first we have to do this process to remove funds that are being placed into a TIF that won't exist. That's all we're doing here.
Okay, thank you. I'm seeing no further lights. We have a motion in a second. Seeing no further discussion, please cast your ballots. Councilmember Ruck-Riegel?
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, or Mr. Manager, I'm sorry.
Thank you. The next item comes to the policy question for council, which is, do you want to port funds from the north side riverfront TIF, or do you want to simply close it out? In the budget, we had proposed porting these dollars into to do two projects. One was to seal coat the streets here in downtown for $300,000. The other project would have been the Roosevelt School project. The option the council has is to simply close out this fund and then declare that surplus, disperse that monies back to the taxing bodies. It will amount to about $300,000 for the school district, which would cover the cost of the Roosevelt School project. The city would see about $70,000 coming back into the general fund as far as revenues that would be received by doing that, by taking that action. The Park District should see about $54,000, same with the county, and then the remainder would go to the smaller taxing bodies that we have as part of the taxing bill. So this gets more to Councilwoman Akeson's policy question that she wanted to discuss about how should we handle these kind of TIFs as they're coming forward.
And I don't know if it really answered all of her questions on them, but I think what it does is this TIF was expiring at the end of the year anyway, and so we just, rather than get into the argument about how we potentially spend that money, if we spend part of it on seal coating and give some to the school district for Roosevelt and some to somebody else, in this case what we're saying is we're just going to close it and give every taxing entity the money back. So in the meantime, we'll have time to schedule a policy session to have the bigger discussion on how we go about doing this, which is, I think, what Councilwoman Akeson wanted to do. Councilwoman Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the graphic, it asks for one or the other. And at this point, I'd like to make a motion that we allow the TIF, the North Side TIF, which has about 44 days left on it, to sunset on its own, with those funds that are in there going back to the taxing bodies, which would take $300,000 that will go back to the schools, that I'm hoping that they would redirect to Roosevelt, not just $250,000, but the entire $300,000.
Okay, the motion was seconded by Councilmember Turner. Is there additional discussion on this item? Councilmember Euler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a couple comments on this. I think this is the cleanest way to resolve these types of situations and puts us, or I should more so, I guess, say takes us out of the position of having to decide what is or is not best for another taxing body to do with their money or request. So they will get the money that is due them, which is actually more than was requested, and they can choose how they spend it. And in light of that, I am also losing one of my preferred projects in this. The manager informed me before the meeting. So it comes with no bias here. I think that this is the right thing to do, even though I am giving up one of the things that I think needs to be accomplished in the spirit of giving here. And we will work through those things at a later time. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wholeheartedly support this. I've been advocating that we close down, shut down this TIF as soon as it expires. So I think this is the right thing to do, and I hope this will continue to be our policy when TIFs expire. So I support this 100%. Thank you.
Okay, I'm seeing no additional lights. We have a motion and a second on this item. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Ruckriegel?
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously. Mr. Manager?
Thank you. The next item in the capital budget came from Councilman Sear. He had made a request that we look at cutting $1 million out of the capital improvements. And what that would be, after looking and discussing that, would be a reduction of $150,000 out of the computers and technology line. That would reduce it down to $250,000. We would reduce the fleet recapitalization line by $240,500, and then reduce the fire fleet recapitalization by not purchasing one vehicle purchasing only one vehicle next year instead of two. And that was planned to come out of debt service or bond funding. And instead, we'd like to move the LawCon and the ADA ramps to the bond funding that we have scheduled in the budget. This would net a total of $980,500, dropping out of the unrestricted capital line and lower that dollar amount by nearly $1 million.
Okay. Discussion on this item, Councilman Sear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Move to approve my recommendations.
Motion to approve, seconded by Councilmember Euler. Additional discussion, Councilman Sear. Do you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Akeson.
Moving LawCon then to bond funding, what sort of oversight then would the council have as far as what kind of expenditures would we obligate ourselves for with the LawCon request in the CIP was really a placeholder, as I understand it. We are not really fully informed yet what that means.
So I'd be happy to answer that. The Illinois Department of Natural Resources has informed us that the National Park Service wants the LawCon issue resolved by the end of April. So we have until the end of April to acquire the land necessary for us to satisfy the LawCon grant. We are currently doing appraisals, working with Paul Finch out of Bloomington to do appraisals on the Riverplex property. The Illinois Department of Natural Resources and the National Park Service have told us that we can't utilize the Southtown properties that we were going to evaluate. Instead, we have to go back to what started this whole thing 20 years ago, which was the Riverplex property. So we have to assess and come to a value of the 3 acres that we lease to the Park District that surrounds the Riverplex property. Once we have that value, they will take out the value of the Rocky Glen property to determine how much land we're going to need to acquire. Once we acquire that land, then we're going to be on the hook, not within the time period that we're talking about by April 30th. We just have to have the land purchased by April 30th. But then we'll be responsible for putting that into a park-like fashion and form so they can be used for open space purposes.
Councilman Akeson.
Thank you for that explanation. My concern, though, with the way that this is coming forward, it would just require a simple majority to approve any sort of spending of money. And I think that this is an important enough obligation that it should require a supermajority. I take some issue with the price point of the land that we've identified as possible replacement land. I question the fact that the appraiser has taken this long. I'm suspicious that it's really somewhat intentional so that we don't have to make this be a supermajority decision. And beyond that, we don't really know exactly what we will be obligated to do with this replacement land. So it may be that we don't have to replace anything, but then we'll get ourselves into this. We've got to buy this land, then we have to improve the property, and then we are now back in the park business extraordinaire, and we already know we can't manage the land that we already are responsible for. And I just don't think that with these budget situation the way it is, we need to be getting ourselves pregnant and not really knowing anything else about it. So I would really like to remove the LawCon and just say we will deal with it as a council when it comes up, and we'll do a budget amendment if we have to.
My only response is you have to deal with it now. We don't have any time. We have to get this done by April 30th.
We have to have the money in the budget.
We don't have any money in the budget.
We don't know how much money it is.
That's correct. We don't know how much money
I think that is a false argument. Maybe, I mean, I've been working on this for the last several years, and I just don't know that that is accurate. I'm questioning whether all this information is actually accurate. I don't understand why we can't wait until we know exactly what we have to do and then do a budget amendment.
It's really rolling the dice. It's if we can not fund this next year, And when we find out that we need more money and it's a budget amendment, then you have to go out and get a supermajority to find the money and to put it in.
But that would force us to be more prudent with how we are spending our money. The price offered for this land is outrageous. It was outrageous, and we've gotten ourselves in a situation where now we have to make this property owner whole, and I just don't think that that is wise. So I would, I'd be happy to support Councilman Sears' recommendation, but I would really like to move the law con out and vote on that separately.
And is there a second? Okay, so we have a second for the motion. I just want to point out that I'm very comfortable that under the budget constraints that we're in and that we're going to be in next year, I don't think that the council feels necessarily obligated that we will necessarily stay with the parcel that's been identified. It could be another parcel, but at least we're going to have the money in there. But I'm fine with letting the council vote on it. Is there anybody else on this? Councilman Jensen.
And I have some concerns about this too, but I have a question for the city manager. So if the motion were to pass without the substitute motion, how would we bond for what you think the full amount's going to be?
We would bond for the project at $500,000. If we don't need it all, we wouldn't use it all, and we would probably shift that into other capital needs that we have and reduce the capital budget. I mean, that would be the only way that we would look at it. What we were trying to do with this motion was to reduce the unrestricted capital line by $1 million. We were trying to pull that down. The only way to do that, knowing that we still have this obligation to the federal government and to the state government that we have to clean up, is that this was the way that we could approach paying for that. So.
Then as a follow-up, how much is the bonding for the ADA ramp?
Just $100,000.
Oh, okay. I agree with Councilwoman Akeson, and we'll be supporting the substitute motion.
So the motion on the floor is just to approve all the items and take the law con out. That's the change. That's the substitute. Just so everybody's clear on that. I have Councilmember Euler and then Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the law con issue, if we don't set money aside in some fashion for that now and come back later and have to actually come up with that money one way or another, that will then probably come out of our reserves, correct, that we're setting aside?
That's correct.
Well, I can't support anything that will cause that to happen because that's just backdooring what we've already been trying to protect. So we have to have some amount of money here to accomplish that. Thank you.
Councilmember Graham.
Councilman Sear, your intent here is to alleviate some of the stress and pressure on our budget as it relates to the deficit that we're all trying to close, to wreak as little carnage as possible on the people in our neighborhoods and in our districts. I appreciate what you brought forward here tonight. We have then, Mr. Chairman, a substitute motion to strip out law con. Do we have a dollar figure on that?
The law con piece is $500,000.
Good grief.
It is just a placeholder right now, but we set aside $500,000 because we're going to be obligated to acquire land and construct a park on that land. We have to put it into open space that the public can use. That's the requirements of the law con grant that goes back to the Riverplex.
I understand. And so it's obviously the intent of the substitute motion to remove that amount of money from this so that we, in essence, would be alleviating the deficit stress by the amount that's left after law con is taken out.
So my understanding would be you would still be cutting $980,000 in capital improvements. The move of law con is just taking it from the unrestricted capital line and moving it into the bond funding. If council votes that action down, then we'll come back to you with requests for money out of reserves to go forward with the law con as we need that. And after the start of next year, that will require a supermajority vote to pass that. If that isn't the case, if you take that up and you decide to put that into the bond funding, you're still cutting $980,000 in capital.
Thank you.
Okay. So the substitute motion, we have a Councilwoman Akeson, seconded by Councilman Montalongo. Again, I do not intend to support the substitute motion. I do have confidence that this council is going to be very keeping an eye on that money very closely for LawCon. It won't be spending it just because we have $500,000 in there. So I will be supporting the original motion if this motion fails. Councilwoman Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Although, I have concerns about this and would like to see more oversight over LawCon, and I think, it is just a placeholder. I don't want to see us having to take that money no matter what the cost ends up being from reserves. So even though I agree that we should have more oversight over LawCon, I don't think I can support the substitute motion. I'm sorry.
We have a motion and a second. Seeing no more lights except for Councilwoman Akeson.
So if I remove my motion with this new information, could I ask the city manager then, what are the other alternatives with this? I mean, when we bundle these all together like this, it makes it difficult for us to make a decision that is really thorough. And, I think the bonding idea for funding it is a good idea. But I have a serious concern just how it's all structured.
So really the only alternative you have is to put the money back into unrestricted capital. So that's the only other place that we can take these funds. We're not taking it out of any TIF. We're not taking it out of stormwater funding. We're not taking it out of sewer funding. We're not taking it out of any other place. It's coming out of the capital budget. Either we borrow for it, and I am more than happy to provide more oversight over this project for council to talk about where we are with this. My intent right now is to try and get this 20-year legacy of a land transfer cleaned up so that we can turn all this land over to the Park District and get out of this, so we don't have to talk about this anymore and we're done with it. Because I think that's ultimately what has to happen, is that we need to just convert this over, let them take over the sponsorship of this grant, and we're done. And we can't convert any more land in the future. And that's the best path and the best course that we need to go.
Okay, well, that's a new twist, that we're going to now have the Park District take it over.
We've done that. We did that with Rocky Glen. We gave them that land.
I'm just saying that's a new twist. I'm learning that tonight on the floor.
It's about the sponsorship. What I've heard from council, or at least from a minority of council, not a majority, but a minority of council, is that we don't like the fact that we're converting land that should be for open space. The easiest way for us to do that is to ask the Park District to take over the sponsorship of this land, and then it can never be converted by the city ever again, because we don't own it.
But that discussion will be had in much more detail. That's
that's a future discussion.
That's your thought.
Yes.
So, the council owns this motion because there's a motion and a second. So we need to vote to this up or down, and then we'll go back to the original motion if it fails. It's the substitute motion. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Ruckriegel?
On the substitute, no.
Okay. That motion fails unanimously, so we're back to the original motion by Dennis Sear, seconded by Councilman Euler. If there's no further discussion on that, I'm seeing no lights. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Sear, or Ruckriegel, I'm sorry.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously. Mr. Manager.
So moving on now, we would be at the discussion about the public safety pension fee. At Councilwoman Akeson's request and at the request of Mayor Ardis and Councilman Riggenbach, we looked at trying to come up with some different levels for the public safety pension fee. In your packet, in your report backs, we have information, and you have a spreadsheet that kind of identifies within report back 6.6. So if you look at budget report back 6.6, which is on page 10, you can kind of take a look at what the estimates of what the revenues would be generated by this would be. We looked at now 4 levels with this. If there was no structure on the parcel, instead of being 0, it would be set at $15. We would still have a $50 fee for structures up to 5,000 square feet. For structures between 5,000 and 10,000 square feet, we set that at $250, and then anything over 10,000 square feet was set for $300. At an 80% collection rate, that would generate roughly $2.2 million of revenue in 2019. So we were looking at trying to be responsive to that question about trying to structure it with some different fees. And we'd be happy to answer any questions with this.
Okay. Councilwoman Moore and then Akison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Earlier, I had a conversation with the city manager regarding this fee, and it was as a result of the number of calls that I received and emails that I received from folks who are going to be impacted. So I would like to direct the city manager to come back with something that either adds another line item where a property, let's say 2,000 square feet or less, is inserted in here at a smaller fee than $50, or if we can just look at the whole public safety fee, and as a result of the capital improvement recommendation just prior to this, we've saved quite a bit of money, and perhaps we can even slash this in half for the first year and then come back next year and look at it again.
You might be able to reduce it by the $980,000. I mean, if we looked at something that might generate $1.2 million, that's something we could look at that would still then balance the budget that was proposed, or that gap that we're short. Because I guess with this capital reduction that was just voted on by council, you're at about $1.25 million is your shortfall right now. So we could certainly look at reducing that if that was council's will.
Absolutely, because there are a lot of homes that are in my district that are, let's say, under 2,000 square feet, that they're owned by folks who $50 would really be a hardship. So if we could reduce that amount at least by half, that would be helpful. So if you could bring that back the next time, I'd appreciate it.
Councilwoman Akison.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming back with the changes, but I don't think that this fee idea is being distributed equitably. You know, for some people, this represents a significant increase in what is essentially a property tax. And then I recall from our last meeting, something was said that this would then go up every year. And we're not seeing that information here.
In report back 6.6, you have that. It does show that escalates up $50 for the larger parcels each year and $5 for the $50 fee each year for the next 4 years after this.
What I mean is we're not seeing up here on this slide for the viewing audience that might be listening. I just don't think that it's enough. I think that for properties that are large, and I'm thinking primarily of the big not-for-profits, I don't understand how, you know, they're getting the service of the public safety and they're not paying any property tax.
No, that's correct. I mean, I think that what we tried to structure this.
So think about that. No, not for, you know, all of the not-for-profits in our cities do not pay anything towards public safety. We could go through the list. It's extensive. Our city is covered in properties that don't pay any tax, and AKA, that's why our property taxes are so high in part. So I would have liked to have seen many more categories, and to Councilman Moore's point, it's a big deal. $50 is a big deal for someone who's only paying $600 in taxes, period. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question. Since this new proposal has additional added fees, shouldn't the amount be higher than the 2 million?
No, it's actually based upon the number of parcels that we have and the dollar amount that we would be charging. It's not generating the parcels with no structure. We've estimated there's about 2,000, and so there's not a lot of revenue that comes in from those. The fee that we originally set was for every parcel over 5,000 square feet. It was going to be $300, and so it's actually gone down. We lowered it for at least 1,200 of those parcels.
Okay, I thought the increase of $300 was an increase.
No, so it's actually for about a half of those larger parcels, the fee went down.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Riggenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two questions, Mr. Manager. The no structure portion of this doesn't go up in the report back?
That's correct.
And that was just an arbitrary decision?
Again, trying to look at it to see if we're actually going to, if that's going to be collectible. That's one of the things that we're concerned about. So we left it at that flat amount for the time being.
Do we have large parcels of vacant land in the city still?
We have about 2,000. We've estimated about 2,000 parcels that are vacant right now. That just means that they have no structure on them. A lot of that's going to be park district. A lot of that's going to be properties where you have. It could be the common area that's in a neighborhood association or that's in a subdivision that doesn't have a structure on it. So those are the kind of elements that we're going to have to look at with that.
So that's going to be an insignificant portion. I'm looking at the numbers, or less significant, let's say. None of it's insignificant at this point. And I agree with Councilwoman Moore and the others that having mediums or a step below that $50, I think, would be very equitable, because I too have heard from a lot of folks in some of the heritage neighborhoods that have small homes, and as Councilwoman Akeson said, the property tax bill, $50 represents a much higher percentage of their overall bill than it would to others. So if we could get a $25 step in there, I think that would assuage some of the concerns. Thank you.
Any additional comments on this, Councilmember Grieb?
I very much appreciate the problem solving that's going on here to make this more palatable. Nobody here wants to raise anybody's taxes. I thought the comments made by Councilor Akeson were totally on target in terms of the nonprofits and what they don't contribute, and yet all the services that the city provides. Manager, in what way might this be changed, or is that going to require a lot of research? If we wanted to pass this tonight, what are you suggesting we might be able to look at for the nonprofits?
You know what we can do? I mean, if council directs me to say we want to go forward with this fee at whatever dollar amount, we can look at restructuring that, and based on the size of the parcels and the size of the business. What Danville did when they modeled it, they looked at it based on structure, size, and then value. So their top end was closer to $1,000 per structure. So we can look at something, and we could look at what that would do in terms of crafting that. If that's council's desire to have us come back with what that might be, whether it's at 2.2 million or some number that's lower than that.
What we're looking for is 1.2 million.
Correct. That's the gap we have right now.
Not 2.2. I think you might have. So the gap's 1.2. So in this vote tonight, just so everybody knows, this isn't. We'll have to bring a revenue ordinance back next week to approve. So if we wanted to give the parameter saying come back to us with 1.2 million in revenue based on this feedback in the areas that we need to be more sensitive to.
So and the way I would take that from what I've just heard is a smaller fee on smaller parcels, a larger fee on some of the larger parcels that we have.
With a 1.2 million.
With a $1.2 million revenue.
Will you finish, Councilman?
Yes,
Okay.
that's exactly where I think we're going on this.
Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got, I guess, two suggestions. One mixed with the question. What if we just did a public safety fee instead of a public safety pension fee, and we only charge nonprofits who don't pay for any public safety? I mean, I see Don, and I understand there could be potential legal issues, but I think that it certainly meets the rational basis test, because nonprofits don't pay anything for all the public safety services we provide. So I'd like the city manager to look into that and find out how much that would raise. And maybe it would be a higher fee. And then we wouldn't be raising property taxes or in effect for everyone else.
We can certainly look into that and try and give you some information back next week. I mean, when we meet again, I mean, that's something that we could do. I don't know how much that would actually raise if we just focused on the non-for-profits with a public safety fee and what that dollar amount would be. I don't know if we could get to the 1.2 million based upon the number of non-taxable entities that are out there, because I don't think you would want to charge governmental entities for that necessarily, would you? I mean, is that...
Well, if you could break it down between the two, but I think like Councilwoman Akison said, there's a large number. Some are bigger than others. I'd like to see what those numbers are. I think that would be helpful. And then just one other comment. I would ask the council again to consider, if the gap is only $1.2 million, is to consider reducing the amount that we are putting into the reserve fund until we get our budget straight. If we reduced it in half, that would be $1 million. So, I'm going to put that out there on the floor again. I think that is an alternative that we should be considering. Thank you.
I have Councilman Sear and then Regenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Manager. In my line of work, people have their biggest two assets, or their home, and for a lot of people, their 401k. I'd like for somebody to explain to me, or maybe reconsider, the $15 no structure fee. We have a lot of homeowners in this room tonight that take a lot of pride in their home because that's their biggest possession, and they replace roof and windows and doors and paint and siding and whatever it takes, whatever they can afford to keep up the value of their home. Now, by doing this, they also pay property taxes, and unfortunately, property taxes go up. The nicer your home is, the higher the property taxes. Now, these people next door to us that don't have a structure on their lot, they're also investors, and as the value of my home and all our homes go up, the value of their lot will go up also. So I'd like for somebody to explain to me why, when they pay at least the same amount of money as I do, like the $50, why would they get a break, since it's an investment for them also? And just like somebody explain that to me. Thank you.
Well, I think that sometimes those parcels aren't necessarily owned by investors. It could be owned by somebody that has taken on that lot as a second part or an extension of their yard. So that property owner could be there and has two parcels that make up their yard, and now they're going to have to pay $65 back to the city. I think in looking at the model, we were looking at that Danville used, we were looking at trying to set this fee originally up based upon the number of structures that we have in the city. We've heard from a couple of council members about putting it in on vacant parcels. If we do that, we can look at adjusting it to say we'll set it at the lower level of whatever the up to 2,000 square feet are, and then vacant parcels will be charged the same. But then you may have somebody that has a side lot that they've picked up either from the city or from the county trustee that may end up paying twice.
I have Councilmember Riggenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just say that the idea that Councilwoman Jensen has is worth pursuing, but not in this budget cycle. We gave the manager, we had that special policy session at the museum back in September where we offered ideas for revenue. This idea was brought forward as a public safety pension fee at that time, and we've had a lot of discussion about that since September. So I would be very apprehensive to tell our nonprofits with 2 weeks to go that we're going to throw a new fee on them and nobody else. So I think that's a good discussion point, and it's very intriguing, but I don't think that's a fair thing to do at this point. So I would move to move forward with this, giving the manager direction to raise $1.2 million to close the final portion of the deficit.
Okay. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Graham. Discussion on the motion. Councilmember Akeson.
Thank you. I just received some information that I think would be helpful for this conversation. Apparently, there are 1,756 tax-exempt properties within the city, and it's broken down by fire district, actually. So, it's 444 in the Central Fire Station District. There's 239 in Station 3, 320 in Station 4, 355 in Station 8, 125 in Station 10, 45 and 11. Anyway, it goes on and on. And, I mean, just to put some, to paint a picture of what kind of numbers we're thinking, it's not just 4 or 5. 1,756 is an extraordinary number of parcels. So I guess you take 1.2 divided by 1,756 and come up with a number. And I do remember there was a time when some of the not-for-profits did lobby in Springfield against fees in lieu of taxes, which was floated as a way for municipalities to get some revenue. And I don't know how that turned out, and maybe that's why Corporation Council's not too thrilled about this. Maybe there's something at the state level that prevents us from doing this. I don't know. Maybe Corporation Council, are you aware of anything that would prevent us from doing that? Fee in lieu of taxes?
Not at this time. However, I would like some opportunity to review that question. I hadn't anticipated that question was going to occur.
Okay. Councilman Montalongo.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple notes here, and I think what Councilwoman Jensen is bringing forward is something that we certainly should be looking into. And as far as these, I think I'd like to learn a little bit more about the no structure and how big of parcels are we talking about. And I think I just want to make sure we're being fair, because I see it, in my district I represent both, those that are probably the under 5,000 and those that are over, and such a drastic change from a 5,000 is $50 and those over 5,000 $250. And I'd still like to have some more discussion about that part, because that's I mean, you have a house that's 5,050 square feet and now you're at 250. I think there needs to probably be some more stepping in there as well. And those are my first thoughts on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to Councilman Riggenbach's comment. I don't think this would be a new fee for the nonprofits, because they're already contemplated correct, Mr. City Manager?
They're
They're included in this proposal that's currently on the floor. So I don't think it's not going to be a huge shock to them because they've been, I mean, since we've been discussing this since September, they're aware that this fee may be coming. And I actually haven't received very much, if any, input from anybody from the nonprofits that are against it and have concerns about it, where I have received a number of calls, emails, comments from people against the fee that are private individuals. So I just wanted to counter that point that Councilman Riggenbach made. Thank you.
Councilman Riggenbach.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. I just get really nervous when we've worked on something for 6 weeks to tell the manager in the next 7 days he needs to revamp it and totally come up with a new plan. The reason we haven't heard from the nonprofits is because they assumed it was going to be a $300 fee. And if you take 1.2 million divided by however many parcels, I mean, that's going to definitely be more than $300. So I would say let's move forward with the motion on the floor to find a way to raise the 1.2 million, and then is it acceptable to have the final breakdown voted on at the next meeting?
Yes.
Because we need to we need to stick with the plan. I think we've been pretty clear about this. Nobody wants to do it, and now we've just cut it in half, so I think we're moving in the right direction of hearing our constituents. We're making that conditions for those with lesser square footage and enhancing the higher ones. So let's see if we've got the appetite for the 1.2 million, and then get the details.
Thank you. I have Councilmember Graham, then Sear, then Jensen.
Councilor Riggenbach, I'm happy to support your motion, but I'm not ruling out what my colleagues want to look at as well. So I think it should be a standalone. In other words, perhaps later on we'll want to consider some other motion. Maybe we'll vote it up or down. So it's in that spirit. You know, I appreciate your attempting to move this forward, and we just don't need to preclude, though, what one of our peers might come up with that we might vote yes or no for. So I will be supporting it.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all right? Okay.
Councilmember Sear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To all my colleagues, you heard me say before that over 60%, or at least 60% of all the revenues in the general fund comes from the 5th District in the form of property taxes or sales taxes and a lot of other fees. And you know, this last year we voted for the stormwater utility fee, which was a brand new fee for all homeowners and also businesses in the 5th District. Nobody, and when I say nobody, I got one call, one person I talked to that was for, but everybody else, I mean, we pay so much already in the 5th District. I just can't support this motion at all. Sorry, Mr. Councilman Riggenbach, but it's just for the 5th District, we pay more than our fair share already, and people are just leaving. I mean, it's just that simple. So, apologize, but I just can't support this motion. Sorry.
Councilwoman Jensen.
Just want to reiterate, I'm not saying that if this fails and the city manager comes back with a fee for nonprofits only, that it's going to be $1.2 million. I've asked him to come back with an analysis of the amount that it would be and how many nonprofits. I'm not suggesting that it should even maybe be more than 300. We have to see what that number is. So I just want to clarify that.
Councilmember Montalongo.
Thank you, Mayor. And you know, this, as I mentioned earlier, I represent probably both sides of that, under 5,000 and over 5,000 in my district. I think what's really important is for this to be done fairly, and if that includes the nonprofits and having a little bit more information, I think it'll be a lot easier to have that discussion. But at this point right now, I'm wanting to see some more information before I can go forward.
Okay, thank you. I'm seeing no lights. We have a motion and a second to direct the city manager to come back with a formula to accomplish 1.2. To direct the city manager to come back with a revenue total of around $1.2 million, which is what, right? That's what we're talking about. That's what the motion is. Okay. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Ruckriegel?
No.
That motion passes with 6 ayes and 5 noes. Voting no, Councilmembers Sear, Jensen, Montalongo, Euler, and Ruckriegel. Mr. Manager?
Well, I think that's the direction that received. I think that what we would do is start to package everything together for a final vote, and that would include the packaged liquor tax. I'm having an ordinance for you. I think what we would do is next week at your meeting, we would have the first reading on the packaged liquor tax ordinance. We'll work on the $1.2 million public safety pension fee. We will bring forward for you the property tax levy ordinance. We have special service area tax levies that we need to bring forward. And then we'll also have bond abatement ordinances for the property taxes for our bonds that we have to issue. We will then have the appropriation and levy ordinance for the overall spending plan that has been laid out. And then lastly, we would close out the Northside Riverfront and have that. So at a future special meeting, I'm thinking December 4th, we would package all of that together and have it ready to go for you. It would allow us at next week's meeting to maybe drill down a little deeper into some of these revenue items that we've just talked about.
So at this point, anticipating that you come back with an ordinance that will be acceptable to the council for 1.2 million, then we're balanced as of right now.
That's correct. The budget would be balanced.
Okay. So anything else that you wanted to bring up, or does it?
Just for information purposes, I know we sent you out a memo last evening pertaining to the fire department with regards to the voluntary separation initiative and the current vacancies that are in the fire department and the projected retirements that are anticipated to go up to looking at January 2nd of this year. We don't anticipate that there's going to be, in discussions that I've had with the fire chief, we don't anticipate that there's going to be any need for any layoffs at this point in time, that we will manage that process through attrition. It would set the level of authorized staffing in the fire department at 189 positions, but they would be starting the year with more than that. And that will allow them in suppression to schedule for more floaters that will be there, that will hopefully allow them to not incur as much overtime. And then as people retire, that number would slowly work its way down to 189 positions. And so that was laid out in the memo that we sent to you. I think everyone has a copy of that memo on your desk. I do know that the fire chief, and see if the chief is here. Chief, maybe if you can come up, we can just talk a little bit about the recommended machine closures, if we could, and just briefly talk about that. That was included as well as part of that memo. Instead of closing Engine 2, the recommendation from the chief and his command team was to look at closing Rescue 1 and Rescue 2, both of those specialized machines, and maybe I could ask the chief to just walk through that portion as well.
Okay. As you saw in your memo, what we've done is we've taken a look at over the last several weeks that we've been going at this process. We looked at a number of different things and really came to an evaluation that we feel that it is better to leave any of our machines in service that has the opportunity to put out fires, which would be our engines. So as opposed to decommissioning engine 2, we've now shifted gears a little bit, and we are looking now to do both of our rescue squads. That decision was made because the rescue squads themselves, even though they are a vital piece of machinery within the city, the way we use them now, we feel that we can accomplish what that machine does probably 90% of the time on the other machines that we have available to us. So what it can't do, what the squads can't do, is they can't squirt water, and the inability to do that really hampers us, especially in the south side where we have a very high fire load. We just didn't feel comfortable removing that machine.
Okay. I have Councilwoman Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm always interested in clear communication, so let me repeat what the chief just said. Engine 2 is staying in Firehouse 8. Okay, so
that is correct.
That's correct. So we will still have water in fire. Last week that wasn't the case. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that would mean that engine 4 and truck 4 will stay in Firehouse 4. And let me, in deference to Councilman Graham's suggestion last week, Firehouse 8 is the one on Hurlburt.
Correct. That is partially correct. Engine 4 will stay in Station 4. We still will be moving truck 4 to the Hurlburt house. So it will stay in the south end, but due to the closure of Rescue 2, we're going to transfer the truck company from the Armstrong station, Station 3. We'll move out to Florence, Station 11, to take over for Rescue 2. So the ability to run with the new MacArthur Bridge is going to open. We got that indication as we open here in the next couple of days. We can run up still into the Bradley area and protect that from both sides as well.
And so also we are going to still look at a new firehouse for the Jefferson House, Fire Station 8-4.
That is correct. That's our recommendation.
And so there are no layoffs based upon what we're looking at today at 7:07 in the evening.
No, Councilwoman. There's no layoffs. It's just a reduction by retirements.
Okay, and finally, I'd just like to thank a couple of people who took the time to sit and visit. I want to thank Fire Union President Ryan Brady for visiting with me, and Chief Olahai. Chief and I visited Friday night. And so a lot of what you're hearing today didn't just happen yesterday. These things were being discussed long before yesterday happened. There was real talk going on, and unfortunately, sometimes folks get out ahead of their skis and they don't realize there are things that are still happening. So I want to thank Ryan. I want to thank you for coming over and visiting with me. Chief, I want to thank you for visiting with me on Friday night. I particularly want to thank former Fire Chief Walt Shelby. He was very instrumental in helping to provide some additional clarity. And Bobby Anderson, who lives in my subdivision and camps out at my house. Thank you, Bobby. I think maybe he can go home now. But basically, what Chief Walt Shelby talked about was the historical context around what has happened with fire companies, how they move, how the engines move from one place to the other, and was able to provide me something I didn't have, which was 30 years of perspective on what has happened with the fire department and how the fire department has been one of the departments out there taking, as Ryan has indicated when we met today, some of the hits over the last couple of years. So I do appreciate those gentlemen coming out and visiting with me. What they understand is that I continue looking for information. I don't wait till Tuesday to come to find out what someone's going to present to me. Rather, I do my homework. And whether people want me to vote on one side or the other, until I get all the information, I don't do that. Finally, I'd like to end by saying that staying woke means more than just Staying woke means many things. It means reaching across the aisle to work with others, to hammer out real solutions, holding each other accountable, actually doing something to make a positive difference, and yes, celebrating our achievement, although they are slow in coming, but being able to say that we did that and we will do more. It also means letting our faith in a higher power and common sense shrink our egos to allow us to enter the door of collaboration and compromise for the benefit of all Peoria residents. There's an old African proverb that states, "In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king." Are we as a community so gullible to allow ourselves to be persuaded by half-truths, usually spread by someone financially or politically or personally benefiting? I hope the heavy turnout in the recent election was an awakening of the residents who are determined to pay attention. And if the large number of those stepping up to run for office is any indication, it was. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming to my office and hammering out some additional details. Now, I want to say to you that Ryan was not happy. The chief was not happy, because at the end of the day, there are some changes that both of them have acknowledged are not ideal. None of these are ideal, and it would be my goal to, as I said to Ryan earlier, that the reason we have Rescue 1 and Rescue 2, there was a reason why they came into existence. And he had explained that that equipment, although being placed on the trucks, would be available. My statement to him was, but there was a reason why we had those vehicles in the first place, to bring that equipment. So at some point, I would like to see those things come back. But thank you, gentlemen, for the conversation.
Councilman Sear, I had you next. Are you good?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, was not about the report, though. If I could ask for a last report, possibly. A few weeks ago, when we were talking about the water company buyout, Mr. Roger Goodson made a comment about possibly raising the fees by 3%, and I'm not clear exactly what he meant by that, and I'm not sure if my colleagues remember that. I'd like to find out, and just have a report to see what he meant by that, and what kind of money was he talking about. Thank you very much, sir.
And Councilman Grabe next.
Well, let me start with a micro question, and then I'd like to go to the larger picture, because when we start talking about fire rescue, what impacts one part of the city impacts the whole. As you know, Chief, I am councilman for District 2, and we have a high school in District 2. We've got some high-rise buildings on the Bradley campus. We have other schools nearby. What's happening to the ladder truck that is at Armstrong now?
That truck will be moving to Station 11 on Florence.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
The truck will be moving to Station 11 on Florence.
On Florence, okay. And how much, if there is something unthinkable that happens at Bradley University, for example, or at one of our schools, how much longer does that take to respond by virtue of the fact that that ladder truck has been moved from Armstrong to Florence?
Council, what will happen in that case will truck now from Holport House will come up to the Bradley area, which actually is in time. We don't have an actual time for that because we've never run it from that station. So all we can do is take the time that it takes the engine to get up there, add a few seconds to it. It's comparable to less than the Armstrong station. It's the fill-in truck that takes longer. We used to get one from Central House, which we will still get. So, again, that one will come up the hill. And our backup truck, Bradley area, is truck 1 now.
Well, I asked this question last time, and I'm not getting a scientific answer tonight.
I have the times for you if you'd like them.
That's what I just asked for. It's going to be very specific because time matters in your business, and you know it, and it matters in the police business too.
Correct. What we do know is, like I said, we don't have, we've never run truck 4 from Station 8 up the hill. We have run engine 2 a number of times. The truck will be slower than engine 2, but not significantly, not a large amount of time. So right now, it takes truck 3 4 minutes 46 seconds to get to the North Bradley. It takes engine 2 4 minutes and 32 seconds. To the South Bradley, it takes truck 3 5 minutes and 53 seconds. Engine 2, it takes 4 minutes and 12 seconds. So you factor that in, you add in, like I said, another 15, 20 seconds, I would say, on the travel time of the truck compared to the engine, and we are very, very comparable coming from Holbert.
And what these cuts involve here, and by the way, just so everybody's clear, I like the people who are in the chamber here who are wearing red shirts. In fact, I love all of you. And I always have. And while I see some of you and know some of you by name, I have been fighting for you for years for one reason and one reason only. Not for a jobs program for you, but for what you do for our citizens. So my fellow counselors, what you are acquiescing in is the reduction in the number of positions, and that means people, real live people who can fight fires and rescue our citizens in their homes and in their businesses. You are reducing the force to what, 189, Chief, with this move?
Yes, sir.
I asked you last time, Chief, if you had read the Matrix study. Have you had a chance to look at that?
Yes, I have.
Thank you. And what did you conclude?
Throughout the Matrix study, we've done a couple of things, as we talked about last, and we discussed it. The preemption stuff we've done, the filling of, like, the rescue squads, added people to, the battalion chiefs was manned the entire time. Where we didn't do is, there's areas in the 17s that still aren't filled. There's areas in the northern corridor, I guess you'll talk about. I think it was they talked about it, gross cell 3, in the study, that we still are not covering. And that I consider that to be the Louisville Slugger Sports Complex, the new mall, that area of town is underutilized or undercovered by the fire department at this time. And that was really what the Matrix study had filled in for us.
So what we're hearing from that study is, for years we've been underserved, yet this council is going down the road of further reducing positions that affect the entire city.
The reductions will, as we've said all along, it just cascades across the city. There are reductions
It certainly does cascade across the city. So I think the reduction in the number of positions, the number of people who are able to get out there and do fire rescue, deeply concerns me. And everybody here in this council chamber has heard me say this over and over and over again. Chief, has our strength been this low in recent years? If so, what year? And then what was the square mileage of the city, the square mile figure for our city?
In front of me. Edit. And again, I just don't want to tell you wrong here. As you know, we've got a number of studies we've done.
And Chief, I'm not trying to put you on the spot because ultimately the council sitting here in this room will be responsible for the decision that is made. So they have a very heavy burden on their shoulders for the consequences of any decision that is made. But I think they need to know the history and the facts.
Councilman, what I can tell you is I looked at 30 years ago, I looked at 1988. 1988, we had a commissioned fire service of 187 people, and we covered 40 square miles.
So now we're at about 50 square miles, and we're proposing to go down to 189.
Correct. At that time, we ran 6,000 calls. Now we're running 19,000 calls.
I rest my case.
Councilwoman Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I've been since I've been on this council, even before that, a long-time advocate for public safety for both the police and firefighters, and I will continue to do that. I mean, I always have done that, and I always will. What I'm concerned about is that this proposal, Chief, even though we're not laying anybody off, it's still eliminating 18 positions. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So currently we're at 207 firefighters. Is that right?
Actually, we had a full staff, but I think 206 or 207.
Okay. And so with this proposal, if it passes, by the end, by next year, we'll be down to 189 firefighters?
Correct.
Okay. That's very concerning to me. And we're eliminating those positions, which means they won't come back.
They will not come back.
I have questions about decommissioning the 2 rescue trucks. So based on this proposal, which we got at 11 o'clock last night, so not a lot of time to prepare for, we're getting rid of the 2 rescue trucks that the whole city has, correct?
That is correct.
And I don't know the answer to this question, but are there just NFPA, are there standards? I mean, are municipalities supposed to have rescue trucks?
Not that I know of. I mean, we have rescue equipment, we have rescue capabilities. They don't dictate how we carry those or the name of the machine to do it on.
And so, can you just explain for the public then how that'll work with Rescue 1, which is being closed or decommissioned, and that's right now at Fire Central, correct?
That's correct.
So that will be no more. And then Rescue 2, which is right now on
Florence.
Armstrong, or it's at Florence, that will be no more.
That's correct.
Okay. And I understand, I mean, this is, like you said, is going to negatively impact the entire city.
Yes, we feel that any reduction, as we've said all along, will cascade throughout our redundancy in our system and those types of things that are built in for those things. But we do believe that this is the lesser of all evils, and that we can cover these rescue squads with the machines that we have. We just can't cover the people.
Is it going to have more of a negative impact on the Bradley area and District 2, since it appears that if you move the truck from Armstrong up to Florence, that's going to be short?
Actually, if we do the run numbers and the way we have it set up now, by moving truck 4 to the Holbert House, which is Station 8, and leaving engine 2 in Station 8, we'll still be up the hill to Bradley as fast as we are now. The 3s will still be coming from Armstrong from engine 3, so we can get to that Bradley area relatively quickly. It's again, as always with everything else, it's the 4th and 5th machine that's going to take longer. We're taking machines out of service, so You know, it's going to take longer to get that last one there than it does now.
Okay. Hang on, I think I had another question, but let me just double check. So what are the NFPA times for effective times?
What is our effective response
times?
Force?
Yeah.
We haven't take Rescue 2 out of service, so we don't know what they'll be 100% out there. We're able to do that computer generated. We do have some numbers that I think we've talked about the last time. Because we had to brown out Rescue 1 this year, so we've already tried, we've already had these going along. So it would be it looks like with Rescue 1, and these are true numbers that we have, during the brownout times in 2018, with Rescue 1 in service, it's 11 minutes, 27 seconds. That's a total complement. The effective response force is there. And without them, it's 12 minutes and 46 seconds.
So it's about a minute 20, or a minute 20 longer?
Correct. The NFPA standard for that is 8 minutes. So we don't meet it with them or without them. And then if you do it with Rescue 2, and again, this one had to be computer generated. We just plucked them out of the computer because they'd stayed in the service for all the calls, basically. Without them in there, it's 10 minutes and 46 seconds. I'm sorry, with them. Without them, it's 12 minutes and 30 seconds.
12 minutes what? Sorry, 30?
12:30, yes.
Okay. All right, I don't think I have any other questions. Thank you.
Not seeing any additional lights. So we take a motion to receive and file this information. Councilmember Euler, seconded by Councilmember Turner. Seeing no lights for discussion, please cast your ballots. Councilmember Ruckriegel?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We're at citizens' opportunity to address the City Council.
Citizens to address. Just need your name for the record, please. 5 minutes speaking limit. Up first, we have Mr. Jackson.
Evening. I appreciate the opportunity to address you this evening on behalf of the NAACP. My name is Don Jackson, and I live at 1123 West Teton Drive in Peoria. However, I grew up on the south side of Peoria. I was born and raised in the old projects, as they used to call them, housing projects. I still have family that lives on the south side, including my great-grandson, who's 5 years old, who lives on John Gwynn. I am concerned. First of all, I want to reiterate some of the comments that were made at the NAACP press conference yesterday, and I suspect the adjustment in this plan came about as a result of some of the comments that were made during that press conference, but I didn't hear anybody say thank you, NAACP, for having that conference. Reiterate one of the things that Pastor Hightower said. It seems like the city of Peoria is in a perpetual state of crisis, especially when it comes to the issue of funding pensions for the fire department and the police department. We have to ask ourselves, how did we get into this mess? What's it going to take to get out of it without bankrupting the city of Peoria? And is there a solution for a permanent fix? Peoria has been listed as by 24/7 Wall Street as a worst place to be African American and to live. I know we've recently improved our position from the worst at number 1 to 3 or 4, but that doesn't mean we've improved things in the city of Peoria. It just means some city is worse than we are. But our problems still persist, and it's not always about jobs, although that's an important inclusion in why it is a terrible place for African Americans to live. It includes what we're talking about today. As we said yesterday, and I repeat today, it seems as though when we have problems with budgetary problems in the city, we always look to the south side, the 61605 zip code, to help solve those problems. I remember a couple of years ago when the city was passing out tickets to manual high school students because they were walking in the streets. They were walking in the streets because there were no sidewalks. In the year 2018, the south side of Peoria still looks like some rural areas in the south with no sidewalks and dirt streets. But on the other hand, you contrast that with what's going on Northmore Road around Richwoods High School. Not only do they have sidewalks, but they even got lights down there that have banners on them to remind us that Richwoods High School is there. We found $11 million to fix that area out there. We still can't fix sidewalks in the south side. And now we're talking about, and notwithstanding the changes from yesterday, we're still losing positions on the fire department. We're talking about making conditions worse for people on the south side by losing the number of positions on the fire department. We haven't even discussed how many positions we'll be losing on the police department. With respect to that, I suspect our ordinance that we passed recently, which would require the city to reflect the composition of the city on the police department and the fire department, I suppose that goes out the window. Another casualty that impacts the African American community. You know, I guess what I want to say is pretty much what we said yesterday. There is an election coming up. We have become one of the most prolific organizations in terms of getting people to register to vote and to get out to vote. We're not where we want to be, but we've done a great job of doing that. And I can promise you that we're going to sort of adopt the Santa Claus theory. We're going to be making a list and checking it twice. See which one.
Mr. Jackson, the 5-minute timer expired. Amy Evans Foster.
Good evening, and I hope everyone can hear me. I am a singer, so I want to make sure that I'm heard, because I haven't stood here. It's been about 50 years that I needed to come and stand here for our city. Mr. Greb, thank you for being my teacher. You were a great teacher. And I am very it hardens my heart when I see a councilman go against their own area that voted them in. I don't understand that. We are a community. And when I went and asked my son, who is here, who was your mayor? He said, well, who was your mayor? I said, Maloof. We didn't want to hear him sing, but I know who he was. I said, and Thomas, who is your mayor? I don't know. You didn't know. This horseshoe has got to come together. Anytime you are not out at the schools and these children don't know who has our future and do not know who the mayor, the manager, the chief of police, all these council people, they don't know who you are, then there is a problem in this city. Because I should not have to go to 10 students and ask, who is our mayor? And then I stand here today, and I know I'm going in circles while you looking at me funny, because that's how I feel. We're going in circles listening to the decisions that you're making for us to live by in our city that we vote for. Now, just as much as we're in a circle, just imagine how much of a circle my son is tonight. He's in a big circle. Is there an ending? I don't know. But before you start taking away firemen that have saved my life in a life-death experience, or when you lay in the bed at night and your child gets in a fight, the first thing you say is, oh, call the police. I'm asleep, dial 911. You just said you want to get rid of their positions. So if we get rid of the positions and they never come back, then what? When those positions that he gave on, or the times that he gave, that's when Peoria was smaller. Peoria is way bigger now. Grand Prairie wasn't there. When I lived down here in 1972, my family was moved because of urban renewal. And we had to move. I never once came back to 61605. But before I let 61605 get destroyed, I just told my husband tonight, before I let a council person take over a community, I'm willing to move back to 61605 and rebuild. Well, you're probably clapping because you are not going to come back again in the next 2 or 3 years. Clap all you want. Because guess what? I'm still going to be here fighting this fight in the city of Peoria. Never once will I down my city. Never once will I doubt my city. And never once will you hear me backbiting my city. I'm putting my trust in the community. And at one time, I did in this entire horseshoe. But when I went to my son and asked him who was my mayor or who was his mayor, and he didn't know, click, it was a problem. You shouldn't even be able to sleep at night. And your high school students or grade school students don't even know who you are. In this horseshoe, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. And then you sit here and smile and giggle and kickle and laugh. It's not funny. This is Peoria's future. Just know it's not your future. It's
Lavetta Ricca.
Lavetta Ricca, 711 South Green Lawn, President of O-Town South Neighborhood Association. I've stood here hundreds of times, you know I've been here. And each time I tell you that I'm going to fight for the South Side until they plant me into the ground. Well, the hole's getting deeper, and my body's forsaken me, but my mouth is still fine, thank you. And that mouth is here to tell you that it's totally wrong what you're doing to our area again. You keep these men, the firemen and the policemen, on the hot seat. Well, this year they got a job, but what's going to happen next year or the next year? Do you know what that does to their families when they're always on the hot seat? You know, I forget what I'm going to say. I'm even losing it up there. I'm not, if you think that I'm going to believe that you're going to build a new firehouse and it's going to be an answer to our prayers, you're wrong. Because my 80 years, I've been here for 80 years and I'm still here. And I hope that when I leave, one of these guys carry me out. I'm not going to leave willingly. I don't believe, over my 80 years of fighting for the South Side, I can't even begin to tell you how many times we have been promised stuff only to have it flushed down the toilet and never return. There's people out in the other districts that refer to me and my family and my people, those people. Well, let me tell you, they think, oh, well, those people deserve it. It's not only those people that this is hurting. Let me tell you a little story. I had a friend who had a house in the Bradley area. She rented to students. And I remember one day she got a phone call where the mother was irate. She was from New York because the city of Peoria was allowing her child's house to have ants. Now, if they're concerned about their children having ants, how do you think they feel about us, the city of Peoria, taking away their security, their firemen, their police? And I know you're going to say they're not taking them away. Yeah, you are, because you're not replacing them. So they're just going away. Bradley University is going to suffer. They're already suffering. They don't have the enrollment that they used to have. You can build all those fancy new buildings, but if you don't have people to come in to sit the seats, the children. I love my city, but you have to figure out a better way to do this than what we're doing it. We need to have our safety there. I need to be able to be assured that when I call the firemen, and it's not even the fires that they put out that's the only thing. Just think of when they're there at the Night Out Against Crime. Just think when the kids are there and they go down to the firehouse and fill their tires with air. That's what we need in the South Side. We're poor. We're poor. I admit to it. You talk about people leaving, moving out. We can't afford to move out. We're stuck. I wouldn't move out even if I could afford. And even if I could afford, I wouldn't move out. But there's a lot of people down there that are stuck. I know.
Steve?
Hippie. I lived in the South End my whole life. I went to St. Boniface. I went to Tree Wind. I went to Manual. Proud of it, too. Proud of the people. I'm going to start off with something different here. I listened to our councilmen here say how they're all for our firemen. Well, the people are for the firemen too. But the problem is, the people out here don't get recognized. We're being raped of our money. I can't give nothing to our firemen out here. It's been taken and wasted out here by our city council. I have a little something here. I know it's going to be boring, but it's part of the Declaration of Independence. And it says that the people are the ones that govern, give the consent to you. And that declaration, if everybody really read this thing, would tell you all what our problem is going on here today. Because it talks about a king in there. And that's what the Declaration was about, to get away from the king. And in there, and one of the problems the king had was he imposed taxes without the consent of the people. I thought I came to an IRS meeting here tonight. All I heard about is all the taxes everybody's going to have to pay on their buildings, their houses, parcels, whatever. How are we supposed to show our gratitude? We're the ones that appreciate them. You're trying to take their jobs away from them. You're limiting them. You're putting us all in danger. Another little something here, if I ain't got it lost now, because I had everything planned out, but I'm amazed. I'm totally amazed. A wise and frugal government, which shall leave men free to regulate their own pursuits in industry and improvement, shall not take from the mouth of the laborer the bread it has earned. Okay? This is the sum of a good government. I don't see a good government here. I've seen everything in here of taking. You can't live. You want pensions for these guys? Then fix the problem. It ain't taxes. It's stop running people out of this town. If you have problems, you can't tax yourself into prosperity. You're making us all poor. You're making us all enemies of each other because we're out here trying to survive now. That is not what our country was created about. And I think it needs to be fixed real quick. I apologize for losing my temper. I came here, but I'm telling you what. All these people here, our black community, our white community, this ain't about colored people. We're losing our dignity, our pride, and we're losing our wealth. Our forefathers fought everything for this for all of us. And it's time we start learning what we're supposed to do to keep these people in check. You look at the state of Illinois. The state of Illinois's got a pension problem too. What's the cure of the pension problem? Let's raise their taxes. I was surprised I didn't hear a tax on being dead. I'll give up the rest of my minute. I can't breathe no more. I've had enough. I apologize. The This 67 phone book says Peoria, the all-American city. I look at downtown Peoria. Right here is downtown Peoria. This is where our money's being wasted, down here for certain people. This whole city's a community. Start treating the people like a community.
Janice Parker.
Good evening, councilmen and women. I'm Janice Parker. I'm here today to shed some light on one of the Peoria police officers that was recently involved with the Cruz case. I am not a family member of the Cruz. I don't know them, but my sympathy is with them. But my son was involved in a police incident with Officer Eisenhart back in April of 2007. So let me set the scene for you really quick. My son was participating in a birthday celebration at a bar here with some friends in the Peoria area. Someone allegedly hit a bartender. They cleared the bar out, and so my son was standing on the outside of the bar waiting for his friends to come out, which was his ride to go home. The police were obviously called. They came from behind my son and apprehended him and began to start to arrest him without even identifying him, asking him who he was or how he was involved. And this was witnessed by a recording from some friends that were there. So they proceeded to arrest him. As my son proceeded to ask him, you know, what was he being arrested for? They claimed that he was resisting. So if you are coming from a bar, being approached from behind and apprehended, what would be your initial reaction? Would you not pull away or what have you? Unfortunately, since about the 5th grade, my husband and I have been teaching our children to comply and complain even before comply and complain was even an issue. And so he understands what that means when you're being approached by a police officer. Long story made short, they ended up arresting my son while he's being retained in the back of a police car. And while his friends are telling the police officer he was not involved in the incident, the police officer continued to ignore it. So another officer comes to the car while my son is being apprehended in there to tell him, you know, you got the wrong guy. Officer Eisenhart responded by saying he needs to learn a lesson. So unfortunately, that lesson to him means that he now has a record because he was arrested. He is an Army reservist. He was in college at the time. So when I heard about what recently happened, and after being a citizen and seeing the video that happened, it brought light to this cannot continue to happen. In this incident, when the officer identified that you had the wrong person, even by your fellow officer telling you that, you still proceeded to arrest an individual who was no threat to that officer, no threat to society, no threat to anyone that was around him, but now has a record. And so to me, as a parent, as a citizen of this community, this has got to stop. So when my son, after he told us, we followed him to the police department the next day to file a report. Unfortunately, the report came back that the officer was doing his job and they found no issues with the arrest. So for me to have been telling a 25-year-old since 5th grade to comply and complain, to follow the proper protocols of police when you're approached, what do I do now as a parent when the system doesn't work for him? When he now has to be looked over for promotions because of a record of being falsely accused of something and now an arrest. It's not fair. So when I look back at the police department statement, the men and women of Peoria Police Department are dedicated to building a strong Peoria. This is not how you build partnerships. This is not how you build a strong Peoria. You don't falsely arrest someone like this, and even after having evidence that this is not the individual, you still proceed to do it. So to me, all I can think of is what other reason would he have to proceed with the arrest is obviously personal. What other reason? He's not guilty. You could have looked him up. He had no priors, never been arrested, never been involved with the police. But now this kid is dealt to deal with a record. And a whole year later, he's still dealing with the financial burdens that come along with being arrested and having court fines and fees attached to him. So I think it's very unfair. So I think in this situation, you know, I don't know if you need to go back and you need to look, Chief Marin, of your policy and procedures, but you can't just do this to people and expect us as citizens and parents to support these kind of things that happen in our community.
Ms. Parker, Ms. Parker, could I ask you to come back up for just a second? Normally we don't. Citizens to address is a time for us to listen, but I'm just making my notes. I missed the year that this incident happened.
2017.
Okay, thank you. Up next, I have Mariah Cooper.
Support of Louis, stand up.
This is a collective call to action message from members of the Black Justice Project. We are not here tonight to speak to members of City Council. At this point, we are giving up on trying to motivate city leaders to fight for our protection against police brutality. This message is designed for all the people at risk of being killed by those sworn in to protect and serve those people who are tired of being targeted and bullied by the police. Lives are being taken from our community and the families. The City Council and other city leaders have given license to the Peoria Police Department to abuse and kill our people by the lack of involvement and complacency. On July 19, 2018, Louis Cruz was killed by the police department, and 4 months later, the community was devastated on November 15, 2018, when his killers were cleared of any wrongdoing. On November 16, 2018, the Peoria Journal-Star released unedited dash cam footage which shocked the community to see that within 3 seconds of exiting the vehicle, Louis Cruz was gunned down. This contradicts the initial accounts given by the Peoria Police Department. According to the police accounts, Louis Cruz exited the vehicle, and while running away, he racked a gun and aimed it at officers. Upon which the dash cam footage, it was shown that Louis Cruz attempted to flee the car unarmed and was shot almost instantly.
People are dying and excuses are useless. We are making an urgent call to action to members of the community fed up with the injustice to stand with the Black Justice Project and the families of Louis Cruz, Daniel L., and Eddie Russell Jr. If this were your son, your father, or your brother, you would want us to stand with you and your family. This message also serves as a reminder that the sitting council at-large seats of Beth Atkinson, Sid Rodrigo, Zach Euler, and Beth Jensen are up for re-election in the spring of 2019. We are asking that you watch everyone running for re-election and those candidates who are challenging the current council members. Question them on their stance relating to incidents of police abuse. Ask them what are their thoughts on their murders in the past 10 months at the hands of police. Ask them how they plan to hold law enforcement accountable. Ask them measures they're taking besides body cameras to ensure that citizens living in underserved areas are being treated with dignity and respect. We need you to vote in the spring elections for those who are unafraid to address the injustices happening at the hands of the police in our city. We also need you to join us in action. As a community, when you give excuses as why you cannot participate, you give permission for these things to continue. Every time you give an excuse as to why you cannot show up, it's another bullet in another officer's gun that is aimed at our young black men. We invite you to visit and like our Facebook page, Black Justice Project, to view the unedited dashcam footage, learn more about how to get involved with the Black Justice Project, and to stay up to date with our community outreach, organizing, and calls to action.
Lyra Hernandez.
Hello, my name is Lyra Hernandez. I am the sister of Louis Cruz. I'm here to bring light to the situation about the police-involved killing of my 19-year-old brother, Louis Cruz. He was killed on July 19th by Ryan Eisenhart of the Peoria Police Department. Up until November 15th, we were left with questions and no answers as to why he was murdered in cold blood. On November 15th, a press conference was held by State's Attorney Jerry Brady, and he released a decision to not charge the officers, basing his decision off of an investigation conducted by the Illinois State Police. Following that, there was a video released to the public by Journal Star, and everything we suspected was confirmed. Louis was killed unarmed and running away from police officers. Since this has happened, our family is hurt and we are completely devastated, beyond repair. There are 2 little girls that do not have a father anymore. There is a mother that does not have a son anymore. There are siblings, 5 to be exact, that do not have a brother anymore. This decision to kill Louis could have easily been avoided had there been a less aggressive approach, and had he had his day in court, because every man deserves his day in court. At this point, no one in high position, including any of the city council members or the mayor, has spoken out about this. Neither have they spoken about Eddie Russell Jr. or Daniel L., which are 2 of the other people killed in police-involved shootings in the last 10 months. The police answer to the city council, so we have a hard time understanding why this is. Our people are scared, and the police are supposed to be our protection, and we cannot count on them for that. I believe reinforcing less aggressive approaches will improve these problems, and I feel every time that there has always been an aggressive approach, someone has died. I also feel they should be held accountable, and there should be something done about the corruption with our police department and our justice system. The inaction of the council and the people in high position is the reason for lack of community support. Although we have a tremendous amount of community support, we ask our community to continue to come together and fight for what's right and fight for justice for Louis. We are demanding justice for Louis. I want to make note that in these situations, people don't stand for what's right until it happens to them. This can happen to anybody. This can be anybody's son, father, brother, anybody. And it should not wait until it hits home before people speak out about it. That is all. Justice for Louis.
Shama, St. Louis.
Good evening. My name is Shama St. Louis. I live somewhere in Peoria. And I am here because we need justice for Eddie Russell Jr., Daniel L., and most recently, Louis Cruz. The mere fact that this issue of police accountability for the way they deal with citizens, specifically people of color, isn't even on the agenda is very telling of just how disengaged city leaders are. And to be honest, I don't think anyone sitting around the horseshoe feels any personal responsibility for the poor relationship that exists between communities of color and law enforcement. On November 15th, I watched as Mayor Artish joined the sister of Louis Cruz, who spoke before me, and myself in a meeting with State's Attorney Jerry Brady. We were there to hear the decisions that the officers involved in Louis' death would not be charged. He walked in, he grabbed a report, he flipped through that report, and he left. He did not offer his condolences. He did not make eye contact with the family. He did not show empathy. And I think leadership starts at the head. How you treat people determines your character, and that energy trickles down to those who work under you. So it's no wonder we have a city council that is disengaged and police who don't know how to deal with the citizens they're here to serve and protect. Each and every council member has been silent. No one has given their thoughts or have publicly voiced an opinion regarding the 3 police killings that have happened in the last 10 months. And I don't know about you, but I don't want leadership that will only speak up for a select few. I don't want leadership who is afraid to have the tough conversations. And I definitely don't want lukewarm leadership. Earlier, Councilwoman, I think it was Denise Moore, talked about staying woke. And I like that. I like that. Because staying woke means speaking up and speaking out when an injustice occurs. That's right. It means drawing a line in the sand and not being afraid to pick a side when necessary. Staying woke means being on the right side of justice. Staying woke means being on the right side of justice even when it threatens the alliances that you've built politically. Staying woke means choosing people over politics every single time. There's no description, a part of your job, that is more important than fixing the disparities that are happening in our city economically and socially and between people of color and white people in this community. So it is my call out to the community to encourage every last one of you to be involved. This message is not for them. This message is for you guys. If you don't stand up, if you don't use your voice, if you don't speak out, this is going to happen every single time. And if you don't vote, we got an election, a primary coming up in February and an election coming up in April. If you don't vote these people out for not having your interests at the forefront, then this blood that's on their hands is also on yours. Now I'm going to end with saying we still need justice for Alexis. She's still missing over a year later. I don't think you guys feel like that's your personal responsibility either. And also, we still have our campaign. It's called Bye Beth. Beth Akinson must go. She is racist, and she does not deserve to represent a community this diverse.
Ryan Brady.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Manager, Council, citizens of Peoria, good evening. I'd like to take the opportunity to address you on the cuts proposed to the fire department. Never in a million years could I even fathom almost 10 years ago, after being laid off from Peoria Police Department, the city would again be facing devastating cuts to public safety. While the proposed cuts to the fire department have been portrayed by some as painless, or even a possible solution to the city's financial problems, because there is some flexibility within the operations and budget of the fire department. The proposal to eliminate 18 positions and 2 rescue squads will have a dramatic impact on our ability to provide quality emergency medical care and fire protection. Last year, the Peoria Fire Department responded to almost 20,000 calls for service. Rescue 1, located at Central House on Northeast Monroe Street, responded to 2,880 alarms with an average fire response time of 3 minutes and 16 seconds. Rescue 2, located at Station 11 on Florence Avenue, responded to 1,974 alarms with an average fire response time of 4 minutes and 5 seconds. These 2 fire machines combined responded to nearly 25% of the alarms last year citywide. The primary responsibility of a rescue squad is to render basic life support on an emergency medical call, perform search and rescue for trapped fire victims, and when necessary, extricate motor vehicle accident victims when entrapped inside their vehicles using hydraulic tools, also known as the jaws of life. Rescue squads are also responsible for carrying specialized equipment, such as water rescue equipment, as well as a full complement of other hand tools. Unlike previous proposals, cutting these 2 specialized companies will not only affect one response area, but literally every council district in the entire city due to the nature in which we are tasked to respond. Furthermore, Rescue 1 covers the entire downtown area, North Valley, South Side, East Bluff neighborhoods, Main Street corridor to Bradley University, and all of Interstate 74 east of the University Street overpass. The situation is much worse when you take into account Rescue 2 is primarily responsible for every major intersection on War Memorial Drive and any fire that would occur north of Forest Hill Avenue. Response times matter, and seconds can literally make the difference between a survivable outcome and one that may lead to long-term or even permanent deficit or disability. Unfortunately, the fire chief has been asked if this is his recommendation. And what is troubling is councilors have requested information or reports back, and decisions have already been made to reduce staffing levels and the number of machines without any or all of the information. No person capable of making sound judgment should ever make a decision based on necessity or time when all the information has not been fully presented. While it is sad that these reductions have even been considered, the outcome undoubtedly will have severe consequences to our citizens and the safety of firefighters tasked with mitigating these emergency circumstances. Finally, why is this department continuously, time after time, ranked highest in the quality of level of service it provides to citizens, but cut year after year? Why are firefighters asked to have buy-in by city administrators and give 110% effort only to be constantly faced with reductions or to have taxpayer dollars spent on a study and attempt to drastically reduce the same level of service that our citizens depend on? For years, Peoria Firefighters Local 50 has taken a solutions-based approach and come to the table with revenue ideas and even concessions when our nation was in the last economic recession. It is our request that you, all things being considered equally, and no stone be left unturned to avoid these drastic cuts to public safety, as we do have the best firefighters, hands down. Thank you for your time and your commitment to the citizens of our great city to make public safety a priority. Thank you.
Darcy Katie.
Good evening, City Council members, Mayor, and the public listening in. My name is Darcy Katie. Tonight I have several major topics of concern, the first being the budget cuts to fire and police departments. I appreciate the collective efforts tonight, however, they must continue and conclude with the fire and police departments keeping their diverse and unique staff, We cannot afford to lose a single one of these overqualified individuals to a narrow-minded, short-sighted plan. My second topic is the case of Alexis Camry Scott. Many people have asked me why so many members of the Alexis Scott campaign are so fierce and steadfast with their support of Alexis and women in the community who have stories so similar to hers. It's because in Alexis we see ourselves. We see the hope of a bright future, the joys of motherhood, and a beautiful young woman deserving of life. She could be our sister, our daughter, our niece, or our friend, but instead she's gone. Due to the improper handling of her case by the Peoria Police Department, the lack of support from the local community, and the bias in all parties involved. As I asked last time, when will it all be enough? When will it be your turn to bear this burden? And when it is, will you be able to do it as graciously as Miss Ellen Scott has? I rather doubt it. So please keep the pressure on in the fight for justice for Alexis, as well as the countless other women in this city who have been affected by sexually based crimes. They are worthy of our help, and they are deserving of a solution to this epidemic. Thank you.
Carrie Hayes.
Good evening. First and foremost, I'd like to address the issue why we're all in the room today, which is basically accountability, right? So you guys sat out here tonight and discussed the budget for Peoria and proposed to make several cuts to our firefighters and our police department. Now, I'm not understanding the whole close Armstrong thing and let a fire station truck come from Florence Avenue, because the way that you guys restructured University Street, if there was a fire close to Councilmember Graham's house, Lord forbid a fire truck have to get down University or have to turn to get down University. So people can actually die. Did you hear me? People can actually die if you take away that station, right? But it's not that you guys care. That's the problem. See, people are dying. And I don't see you guys coming up with very many solutions to help save their lives. My respect to the family of Louis Cruz, who I remember in September of last year, I was standing up here for the family of Eddie Russell Jr. Same thing. I understand that your police department, the union, is against the body cameras. They're telling you they don't want to wear your cameras, and you're saying, okay, but in the meantime, my brother, my cousin, my uncle, my nephew, my dad, they're all endangered species. When you go home, you don't have to fear for your nephew, Mayor, because your nephew is out here pulling pistols. It makes absolutely no sense. And then, every time I get up here, I'm like, man, I should just sit back and let the community talk, because you know what? They got a lot to say back here. But y'all don't hear them just like you don't hear me, so I'm going to come up here and waste your time just like you feel like they're wasting your time. I got nothing else to do. Councilwoman Moore, I used to look up to you. You used to be on a pedestal. Honey, couldn't nobody tell me about Denise Moore. And now, I don't even let people talk to me about you anymore. That's pretty sad, Denise. I wish you'd take that smirk off your face. I am really, really, really sad to understand that you guys don't take the same pride in your community. You just don't. And the only reason why we didn't include Mr. Turner is because he's retiring after 27 long, drawn-out years. Or whatever. I'm really glad to see some changes going on. I know that there's been 11 people to contest these 5 seats. I hope Dr. Rita Ali gets in one. In the meantime, I'll be doing everything I can on my end to keep engaging my community and my peers to stand up here and tell you, go screw yourselves. I can't wait to see you guys in the next election. I'm ready. I hope you are too.
Madam Clerk.
We do not have an executive session, and so we would be at adjournment.
Motion to adjourn by Councilman Euler, seconded by Councilman Graham. Please cast your ballots. That motion passes unanimously. We'd like to thank our listening audience. This meeting is adjourned. Happy Thanksgiving.